A wealthy woman humiliates a child after discovering he was stealing food from her restaurant. However, when she follows him, she's shocked by what she discovers. The sun had barely risen when Evelyn Blackwood stepped into the Aura restaurant. Her high heels echoed across the marble floor, announcing her arrival. At 45, with impeccably styled hair and a tailored suit, she was the picture of success. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood," one of the staff members said timidly. Evelyn gave a brief nod, her eyes already scanning every detail of the restaurant. Nothing escaped her critical gaze. "Mark," she called sharply. A young waiter appeared, nervous. "Yes, ma'am?" "The glasses are poorly polished. Take care of it immediately," Evelyn ordered. "Sorry, ma'am, I'll fix it right away," Mark stammered, hurrying to the kitchen. Evelyn sighed in irritation. Good employees were so hard to find these days. She walked to her office, ignoring the anxious glances from her staff. Seated at her desk, Evelyn began reviewing the month's numbers. Aura was doing well, but she always wanted more. More profit, more prestige, more power. That's what she had focused on ever since her divorce. Her phone rang. It was Jake, her 17-year-old son. Evelyn looked at the phone for a moment, hesitant. Finally, she decided to ignore the call. She didn't have time for teenage drama right now. The hours flew by as Evelyn buried herself in work. Lunch arrived, and Aura was filled with rich and famous customers. Evelyn watched everything from her office, pleased with the sound of expensive silverware clinking and refined conversations. Suddenly, a scream echoed through the dining room. Evelyn stood up quickly, her face a mask of irritation. What was happening in her perfect restaurant? She stormed out of her office only to see a chaotic scene unfolding. A ragged boy, no older than 10, was being held by two waiters. A customer was screaming, pointing at her plate. "He was stealing food off my plate," the woman exclaimed indignantly. Evelyn felt her blood boil. How dare that little brat enter her establishment and cause such a scene? "Let him go," she ordered coldly. The waiters obeyed immediately. The boy looked at Evelyn, his eyes wide with fear. She stared back, her gaze as hard as steel. "What's your name, boy?" Evelyn asked, her voice cutting. "To Tommy," the boy stammered. "Well, Tommy," Evelyn said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Do you have any idea what you just did? This is a high-class establishment. People like you aren't welcome here." Tommy trembled, tears beginning to form in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I was just hungry." "Hungry?" Evelyn scoffed. "There are places for people like you to eat. Shelters, soup kitchens. Not my restaurant." She turned to the waiters. "Take him out of here and call the police. We'll teach this young thief a lesson." Tommy's eyes widened in panic. In a quick motion, he broke free from the waiters and ran toward the exit. In his haste, a crumpled piece of paper fell from his pocket. Evelyn watched the boy flee, a satisfied smile on her lips. She bent down to pick up the paper, ready to throw it away. But something made her stop. Curious, she unfolded the note and began to read. Her eyebrows raised in surprise. The note said, "Sarah, I'm sorry I couldn't get the medicine today. I promise I'll try again tomorrow. Hang in there, sis. Love, Tommy." Evelyn reread the note, a strange feeling forming in her chest. Who was Sarah? Why was Tommy so desperate for food and medicine? She looked at the door where the boy had run out, a spark of curiosity replacing her earlier anger. Maybe, Evelyn thought, there was more to this story than it seemed. Tucking the note into her pocket, Evelyn turned her attention back to the agitated customers. "I apologize for the inconvenience," she said, her voice returning to its usual professional tone. "Please enjoy a dessert on the house." As the customers calmed down and the restaurant returned to normal, Evelyn couldn't stop thinking about Tommy and the mysterious note. For the first time in years, something other than profits and status had captured her attention. Little did she know that small piece of paper would change her life forever. The next day dawned cloudy, reflecting Evelyn's mood. She hadn't slept well, with Tommy's note still weighing heavily on her mind. Determined to uncover the truth, she arrived at Aura earlier than usual. Evelyn spent the morning distracted, her eyes constantly watching the restaurant's entrance. Finally, around noon, she spotted a familiar figure. Tommy was back, lurking near the restaurant's dumpsters. Without thinking twice, Evelyn slipped out the back. She followed Tommy at a distance, trying not to attract attention. The boy zigzagged through alleys and narrow streets, occasionally glancing over his shoulder. After a 20-minute walk, Tommy entered an abandoned building. Evelyn hesitated for a moment, but her curiosity got the better of her. She silently entered, climbing the stairs behind the boy. On the third floor, Evelyn heard voices. She approached the slightly open door and peeked inside. What she saw left her breathless. Tommy was kneeling beside an improvised bed where a small, pale girl lay. "Sarah, I brought some food," he said softly. Evelyn watched in shock as Tommy pulled scraps of food from his pockets and offered them to his sister. Sarah, who looked no older than 6, smiled weakly. "Thank you, Tommy," she whispered. "You're the best brother in the world." Tommy smiled, but Evelyn could see the tears in his eyes. "I'll get your medicine soon, I promise." Evelyn stepped back, her mind spinning. 2 children, living alone in these conditions? How was this possible? Suddenly, she stumbled over a loose board, making a loud noise. Tommy rushed to the door, his eyes widening when he saw Evelyn. "You!" he exclaimed. "What are you doing here?" Caught off guard, Evelyn stammered. I wanted to know why you were stealing food." Tommy stood in front of the door, shielding Sarah. "Go away. I'm not letting you separate us." "Separate?" Evelyn asked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Sarah coughed, drawing everyone's attention. Tommy rushed back to her, leaving Evelyn to step into the room. "Please," Tommy pleaded, "don't tell anyone. We can't go to an orphanage. I promised our parents I'd take care of Sarah." "Your parents?" Evelyn asked softly. "Where are they?" Tommy's face twisted with pain. They died 3 months ago." Evelyn felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. "How?" she whispered. Tommy closed his eyes, reliving the memory. "It was a car accident. We were all together, coming back from a trip. Suddenly the car started making a strange noise. Dad lost control. He stopped, unable to continue. Sarah reached out, holding her brother's hand. When I woke up in the hospital," Tommy continued, "they told me our parents didn't survive. Sarah was really hurt. She needs medicine, but we don't have any money." Evelyn looked around, noticing for the first time the details of the room. Old clothes piled in a corner, empty food wrappers, a thin blanket over Sarah. The reality of the situation hit her hard. "Why didn't you ask for help?" she asked. "We're scared," Tommy replied. "If they find out we're alone, they'll send us to different places. I can't lose Sarah too." Evelyn felt something stir in her chest. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Compassion. "You can't keep living like this," she said, her voice softer than it had ever been. "Sarah needs proper medical care." Tommy looked at her, suspicious. "Are you going to report us?" Evelyn hesitated. All her life she had followed the rules, prioritizing business and profit above all. But looking at these 2 desperate children, something inside her changed. "No," she finally said. "I'm not going to report you, but you need help, and I want to help." Tommy and Sarah exchanged surprised looks. "Why?" Tommy asked. "You don't even know us." Evelyn didn't have an answer. She didn't fully understand her actions herself. All she knew was that she couldn't leave these children alone. "Let me help," she insisted. "I can bring food, medicine for Sarah. No one has to know." Tommy seemed uncertain, but Sarah smiled. "She seems nice, Tommy," the little girl whispered. After a moment of hesitation, Tommy nodded. "All right," he said, "but if you betray us—" "I won't," Evelyn promised, surprising herself with her own sincerity. As she left the abandoned building, Evelyn felt different. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about business or money. Her heart was full of concern for Tommy and Sarah. "I'll help them," she murmured to herself, "no matter what it costs." With that promise, Evelyn began planning how she could assist the children in secret without raising suspicion. She knew she was stepping into unknown territory, but something inside her told her it was the right thing to do. In the days that followed, Evelyn found herself living a double life. During the day, she continued to be the ruthless businesswoman everyone knew. At night, she transformed into a secret benefactor. Her first task was to ensure that Tommy and Sarah had proper food. Evelyn discreetly began packing leftovers from Aura into containers that she left near the abandoned building. "What's this?" Tommy asked suspiciously the first time he found the meals. "It must be from that lady," Sarah replied, her eyes shining with hope. Evelyn watched from a distance, feeling a strange satisfaction as she saw the children eating with such joy. But food wasn't enough. Sarah needed urgent medical care. Evelyn knew she couldn't just take the girl to a hospital without raising suspicion. So, she did something she never imagined she would do. She used her connections to find a discreet doctor. "I need you to examine a child," Evelyn told Dr. Roberts, an old friend. "But it must remain absolutely confidential." The doctor looked at her curiously but agreed. "You know you can trust me, Evelyn." The following night, Evelyn brought Dr. Roberts to the children's hideout. Tommy was apprehensive at the sight of the stranger, but Sarah calmed him. "It's okay, Tommy," she said. "The nice lady brought help." The doctor examined Sarah carefully while Evelyn waited anxiously. Finally, he turned to her. "The girl needs medication and better nutrition," Dr. Roberts said. "But with the right care, she'll be fine." Evelyn felt a relief she didn't know she was capable of feeling. "I'll do whatever it takes," she promised. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn dedicated herself to caring for the children without revealing her identity. She left medicine, clean clothes, and even some toys along with the meals. Tommy and Sarah began referring to their mysterious benefactor as the Angel. Evelyn, hearing this from her hiding spot, felt something strange in her chest. Was it pride or something deeper? One day, as she was leaving the usual supplies, Evelyn heard a noise behind her. She turned quickly, only to find Tommy. "It's you!" he exclaimed, his eyes wide with surprise. Evelyn froze, caught off guard. "Tommy, you're our angel," Tommy said, his voice a mix of admiration and confusion. "But why? You didn't like us." Evelyn felt the words stick in her throat. How could she explain something she barely understood herself? "I was wrong," she finally admitted, "about many things." Tommy studied her for a moment, then smiled. "Sarah will be so happy to know it's you." At that moment, Evelyn realized there was no turning back. Her involvement with the children could no longer be anonymous or distant. "How is she?" Evelyn asked, surprised by the genuine concern in her voice. "Much better," Tommy replied, "thanks to you." Evelyn felt something warm spread through her chest. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. The warmth of someone's gratitude. Can I see her?" Evelyn asked hesitantly. Tommy nodded, taking her hand without a second thought. The simple and confident gesture caught her off guard. As they climbed the stairs, Evelyn found herself reflecting on the past few weeks. She had neglected meetings, arrived late to work, and even ignored important calls, all to care for two children she barely knew. "What am I doing?" she murmured to herself. But when they entered the room and Sarah beamed at the sight of her, Evelyn knew the answer. She was doing the right thing, perhaps for the first time in her life. "It's you," Sarah exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. "Our angel." Evelyn approached the bed, feeling strangely nervous. "How are you feeling, Sarah?" "Much better," the girl replied. "Thank you for everything." At that moment, looking at the grateful faces of Tommy and Sarah, Evelyn felt something inside her fundamentally change. The priorities that once seemed so important, money, status, power, suddenly felt hollow compared to the well-being of these two children. "I'm going to take care of you," Evelyn promised, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. No matter what happens, Tommy and Sarah exchanged hopeful glances, and Evelyn knew there was no turning back. She was fully committed now, for better or worse. As she left the building that night, Evelyn wondered how she would balance her new mission with her old life. She knew challenges would come, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was doing something truly meaningful. With one last look at the building, Evelyn made a silent promise to herself. She would do whatever it took to protect Tommy and Sarah, no matter the cost. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn dove deeper into her secret mission. She knew that just food and medicine weren't enough. Tommy and Sarah needed a future. One day, Evelyn arrived at the hideout with a bold proposal. "Tommy, how would you feel about going back to school?" The boy looked at her surprised. "School? But how?" "I know of a private school," Evelyn explained. "I can enroll you there. No one will ask questions." Tommy hesitated. "And Sarah?" "I'll take care of her while you study," Evelyn promised. After much discussion, Tommy agreed. Evelyn used her influence to get him enrolled without raising suspicions. She bought uniforms, books, and everything he needed. At Aura, Evelyn's frequent absences started to get noticed. Her manager, Mark, approached her one day. "Mrs. Blackwood, is everything all right? You've been leaving a lot lately." Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. Lying had never been hard for her before, but now, "I'm working on a personal project," she replied vaguely. "Don't worry, it's under control." Mark seemed skeptical but didn't push further. Evelyn knew she had to be more careful. At home, things weren't much better. Her son Jake tried once again to reach out. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked one night as Evelyn arrived home late. "Not now, Jake," she answered distractedly. "I'm tired. Tomorrow, okay?" Jake looked hurt, but Evelyn barely noticed, her mind already on the tasks ahead for Tommy and Sarah. Evelyn's routine became a complicated dance of secrets and half-truths. She split her time between Aura, her home, and the children's hideout, always fearing she'd be caught. One day, as she was bringing supplies to Tommy and Sarah, Evelyn was nearly discovered. She was leaving the abandoned building when she heard a familiar voice. "Mrs. Blackwood?" It was Lisa, one of the waitresses at Aura. Evelyn felt her blood run cold. "Lisa, what are you doing here?" "I live nearby," Lisa replied, eyeing the bags Evelyn was carrying curiously. "Are you all right? Need any help?" No, Evelyn responded quickly. "Just doing some charity work. Donations for those in need." Lisa seemed to accept the explanation, but Evelyn knew it had been a close call. She needed to be more careful. As the days passed, Evelyn felt the weight of her lies growing. She was lying to her employees, to Jake, to everyone. The guilt began to gnaw at her conscience. One night, while helping Tommy with his homework, Evelyn noticed something strange in his history book. "Tommy, where did this book come from?" "The school gave it to me," he replied. "It's about the history of the automotive industry." Evelyn flipped through the book absent-mindedly until a page caught her attention. It was about car recalls due to factory defects. Suddenly, a memory hit her. "Tommy," she asked slowly, "do you remember the brand of the car your parents—" Tommy furrowed his brow, trying to remember. "I think it was a Stellar." Why? Evelyn felt like she had been punched. Stellar was one of her company's brands. With trembling hands, she pulled out her phone and did a quick search. Her heart sank when she saw the results. There had been a recall on Stellar cars for brake system issues, exactly around the time of Tommy and Sarah's parents' accident. "This can't be," Evelyn murmured, feeling dizzy. "What is it?" Tommy asked, concerned. Evelyn looked at the boy, a wave of guilt washing over her. Could her company, her car, have been responsible for the death of his parents? "Nothing," she lied, forcing a smile. "I just remembered something from work." But inside, Evelyn was in turmoil. If her company was responsible, did that mean she had indirectly caused these children's suffering? That night, as she returned home, Evelyn felt suffocated by the weight of her discoveries and lies. She glanced at a picture of Jake on her bedside table, realizing how much she had neglected her own son while caring for Tommy and Sarah. "What am I doing?" she whispered to herself. Evelyn knew she was at a point of no return. Her actions had consequences she never imagined. Now she had to decide. Would she keep lying or face the truth, no matter the cost? With this question echoing in her mind, Evelyn fell into a restless sleep, knowing that the decisions she made from that moment on would change her life forever. The discovery of her company's possible involvement in Tommy and Sarah's parents' accident consumed Evelyn. She spent days secretly investigating, combing through old reports and talking to retired engineers. One morning, while reviewing documents in her office at Aura, Evelyn received an unexpected call. "Mom, we need to talk," Jake said, his voice tense. "Not now, Jake. I'm busy," Evelyn replied automatically. "It's always like this, isn't it?" Jake retorted. "You never have time for me." "Fool." The bitterness in her son's voice made Evelyn pause. "Jake, No more excuses. I'll be home tonight. Either we talk or—" The call dropped. Evelyn stared at the phone, a sinking feeling growing in her stomach. That night, Evelyn came home to find Jake waiting in the living room. The air was thick with tension. "Where have you been, Mom?" Jake asked bluntly. "Working as always," Evelyn answered, avoiding her son's gaze. "Liar," Jake accused. "You've been acting strange. Leaving at odd hours, coming back late. What's going on?" Panic surged through Evelyn. How could she explain without revealing everything about Tommy and Sarah? "Jake, it's complicated. I have a special project." "More important than your own son?" Jake shouted, his frustration boiling over. "You barely talk to me. It's like I don't even exist." The words hit Evelyn like a slap. "Jake, that's not true. I love you." "Love? Then why are you never here? Why don't you ever listen to me?" The argument escalated quickly. Years of resentment and neglect surfaced. Evelyn, torn between her secret and her son, didn't know how to fix things. "Maybe I should just leave," Jake finally said, his voice breaking. "Jake, no!" Evelyn pleaded, but it was too late. She watched helplessly as her son walked out the door carrying a backpack. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the empty house, leaving Evelyn in shock. In the days that followed, Evelyn felt lost. Her attempts to contact Jake were in vain. She threw herself even deeper into her investigation and caring for Tommy and Sarah, seeking an escape. Tommy, noticing Evelyn's sadness, began to get closer to her. One day, while they were studying together, he asked, "Evelyn, are you sad?" The question caught Evelyn by surprise. Yes, a little," she admitted. "Is it because of your son?" Tommy continued. "You mentioned him once." Evelyn nodded, feeling the tears welling up. "I made a lot of mistakes with him." Tommy hesitated, then softly said, "You know, sometimes you remind me of my mom. She worked a lot too, but she always found time for us." Tommy's words struck Evelyn deeply. She realized that, without meaning to, she had become a mother figure to him while neglecting her own son. That night, Evelyn finally found the missing piece in her investigation. An internal report confirmed that there had been a brake system failure in Stellar Cars, the exact model involved in Tommy and Sarah's parents' accident. The confirmation devastated her. Her company was indeed responsible. The destroyed lives, Tommy and Sarah's suffering, could have been prevented. As Evelyn grappled with this revelation, another problem loomed on the horizon. Marcus Sterling, a business rival for years, had begun asking uncomfortable questions. "Evelyn, I've heard rumors about your extracurricular activities," Marcus remarked at a business event. "I hope it's nothing that could damage your reputation." Marcus's threatening tone didn't go unnoticed. Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine, realizing that her secrets might be at risk. That night, lying in bed, Evelyn felt completely torn. On one side, the guilt over the accident and her desire to help Tommy and Sarah. On the other, the pain of Jake's absence and the threat of Marcus Sterling. Her past and present seemed on a collision course, and Evelyn didn't know how to stop the impending disaster. As sleep eluded her, she wondered, how could she reconcile all these parts of her life? How could she fix the mistakes of the past without destroying everything she had built? With these questions echoing in her mind, Evelyn knew that difficult decisions would have to be made. The future, once so clear and defined, now seemed uncertain and frightening. But one thing was certain: there was no turning back. The past she had tried so hard to ignore was now catching up with her, demanding that she face the consequences of her actions. With a heavy sigh, Evelyn braced herself for the challenges ahead. She knew the road ahead would be tough, but she was determined to do what was right, no matter the cost. The following days were tense for Evelyn. The shadow of Marcus Sterling loomed over her, threatening to expose her secrets. She saw him at corporate events, his sly smile hinting that he knew more than he let on. "Evelyn, what a pleasant surprise," Marcus said at a cocktail party. "I hear you've been dabbling in philanthropy?" Evelyn forced a smile. "I've always been interested in social causes, Marcus." Of course, he replied, his eyes gleaming. "I hope these activities don't interfere with business." The veiled threat was clear. Evelyn knew she had to be more careful. Meanwhile, a new threat emerged. One day, Tommy approached her, panic in his eyes. "Evelyn, our uncle is back," he said, trembling. "He wants to take us away." Evelyn's heart sank. "Your uncle? I thought you didn't have other relatives." "He's our father's brother," Sarah explained. "But he's bad. He always yelled at us." Evelyn hugged the children, feeling a wave of protectiveness wash over her. "Don't worry," she promised. "I won't let anything happen to you." Determined, Evelyn sought out a trusted lawyer. She explained the situation, leaving out the more compromising details. "I want legal custody of these children," she said firmly. The lawyer seemed surprised. "Mrs. Blackwood, this won't be easy. There are procedures, investigations." "Do whatever it takes," Evelyn insisted. "Money is not an issue." While Evelyn fought to protect Tommy and Sarah, Jake was battling his own demons. Alone in a rented apartment, he felt more abandoned than ever. One night, unable to bear the loneliness, Jake decided to go back home. He wanted to confront his mother, demand answers. When he arrived, the house was empty. Frustrated, Jake began rummaging through the rooms, searching for some clue about his mother's strange behavior. In Evelyn's office, he found something unexpected: children's drawings, medical prescriptions in Sarah's name, school documents for Tommy. "What the hell is this?" Jake muttered, confused. At that moment, Evelyn walked in. Seeing Jake holding the paper, she froze. "Jake, what are you doing here?" "The question is, what is this, Mom?" Jake demanded, waving the documents. "Who are Tommy and Sarah?" Evelyn felt her world crumble. Her biggest secret was out, and to her son no less. "Jake, I can explain." "Explain what?" Jake shouted. "That you have a secret family? Is that why you never have time for me?" "It's nothing like that," Evelyn tried to calm him. "They're children who needed help. And me? Didn't I need you?" Jake shot back, tears in his eyes. The confrontation that followed was intense. Jake demanded to know the whole truth, while Evelyn struggled to explain without revealing too much. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jake asked, hurt. I didn't know how," Evelyn admitted. "Everything happened so fast." As Evelyn told the story, omitting the part about the accident, Jake wavered between anger and confusion. "So you just decided to adopt 2 random kids?" he questioned. "It's not that simple," Evelyn replied. "They needed me." "And I didn't?" Jake shot back. The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn realized how much she had hurt her own son, even while trying to do good. "Jake, I'm so sorry," she finally said. "I've failed you so many times, but helping Tommy and Sarah doesn't mean I love you any less." Jake looked at her, years of pain reflected in his eyes. "I need time to process this," he said, heading for the door. "Jake, please," Evelyn pleaded. "Don't leave again." But Jake was already walking out. At the last moment, he turned. "Mom, I want to meet them. Tommy and Sarah. Maybe we can talk later." With that, he left, leaving Evelyn in a whirlwind of emotions. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. Her world was falling apart around her. Marcus Sterling was threatening her secrets. Tommy and Sarah's uncle wanted to take them away. And now Jake knew everything. But amidst the chaos, Evelyn felt a growing determination. She had started this journey to help 2 defenseless children, and she wasn't going to give up now. "I'll protect them," she murmured to herself. "All of them. Tommy, Sarah, and Jake." With that promise, Evelyn began planning her next move. She knew the days ahead would be tough, but she was ready to fight. What Evelyn didn't know was that her battles were just beginning, and that her decisions would have consequences she could never have imagined. The day broke gray, reflecting Evelyn's mood. She hadn't slept, spending the night planning how to deal with the threats closing in on her. But first, she needed to talk to Jake. Evelyn met her son at a nearby cafe. Jake looked tired, with deep bags under his eyes. "Thank you for coming," Evelyn said as she sat down. Jake nodded, his eyes filled with questions. "I'm ready to hear the truth, Mom. All of it." Evelyn took a deep breath and began to tell him everything. About catching Tommy stealing food, discovering the children's situation, and how she got more and more involved. "But why hide it from me?" Jake asked, hurt. I didn't know how to tell you," Evelyn admitted. "And the longer I waited, the harder it got." Jake was silent for a moment, then asked, "Were you trying to replace me? To create a new family?" The accusation hit Evelyn like a punch. "No, Jake, never. You are my son. Nothing can change that." "But you spend all your time with them," Jake retorted, "while I've been pushed aside for years." Evelyn felt tears forming. "I know I failed you, Jake, so many times. But helping Tommy and Sarah made me realize how much I've lost with you. I want to make things right." Jake looked at her, years of pain reflected in his eyes. "I don't know if I can believe you, Mom." At that moment, Evelyn's phone rang. It was Marcus Sterling. "Evelyn, dear," Marcus's voice was syrupy. "I have some interesting information about you. How about a meeting?" Evelyn felt her blood run cold. "Not now, Marcus." "Oh, but I insist, unless you want this information going to the press." Evelyn hung up, trembling. "What was that?" Jake asked, noticing her pale face. "Work problems," Evelyn lied. "Jake, I have to go, but can we continue this conversation later?" Jake looked at her, disappointed. "Sure, Mom, like always." Evelyn felt the weight of those words as she rushed out. At Marcus's office, Evelyn found her rival smiling like a cat that had just caught a mouse. "Evelyn, Evelyn," Marcus hummed. Who would have thought the great businesswoman had a heart after all? "What are you talking about, Marcus?" Evelyn tried to stay calm. Marcus tossed a folder onto the desk. "Tommy and Sarah Brown, orphans in your care. But here's the interesting part. The accident that killed their parents? It was caused by one of your company's cars." Evelyn felt the ground disappear beneath her. "How? I have my ways," Marcus smiled. "Now imagine the headlines. Businesswoman hides children affected by flaws in her products. It would be quite the scandal." "What do you want, Marcus?" Evelyn asked, defeated. "Simple. Sell me your company. For a fraction of its value, of course, or all this goes public." Evelyn left Marcus's office feeling nauseous. Everything was falling apart. Jake hated her. Tommy and Sarah were in danger, and now her company was under threat. That night, alone at home, Evelyn considered giving up. Maybe it would be best to hand Tommy and Sarah over to the authorities, sell the company, and disappear. She picked up a picture of Jake as a child, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, "for everything." As she pondered her options, Evelyn realized how much she had changed. The cold, calculating woman from months ago was now vulnerable, fighting to protect those she loved. The phone rang, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was Tommy. "Evelyn." The boy's voice sounded scared. "Our uncle is here. He says he's taking us away." Tommy's panic ignited something in Evelyn. No, she couldn't give up. Not now. "Stay calm, Tommy," she said, already grabbing her keys. "I'm coming. I won't let anything happen to you." As she rushed to her car, Evelyn made a silent promise. She would face everything. Jake, Marcus, the children's uncle. No matter the cost, she would protect her family. All of it. Marcus's ultimatum echoed in her mind. Sell the company or be exposed. But now Evelyn realized there was a third option. Fight. With renewed determination, she sped through the night, knowing the decisions she made in the next few hours would shape not only her future, but the future of everyone around her. The truth hurt, but Evelyn was ready to face it. Because sometimes it's only through pain that we find our true strength. Evelyn arrived at the building where Tommy and Sarah lived, her heart racing. She found the children trembling in fear, hiding in the bedroom. "Where's your uncle?" Evelyn asked, pulling them into a hug. "He left," Tommy replied. "He said he'd come back with the police." Evelyn knew she had to act quickly. She took the children to her home, her mind racing to form a plan. The next morning, Evelyn arranged a meeting with Marcus. She needed to buy some time. "Marcus, about your proposal," Evelyn began, forcing a smile. "Oh, changed your mind?" Marcus smirked, confident. "I need more time to consider," Evelyn replied. "It's a big decision." Marcus frowned. "Don't try to stall me, Evelyn. You have 48 hours. Evelyn left the meeting feeling the walls closing in. She barely had time to breathe when her phone rang. It was Tommy and Sarah's uncle. "I know you have the kids," he growled. "If you don't bring them back, I'll go to the press." Imagine the scandal. Rich businesswoman kidnaps poor kids. Evelyn felt panic rising. "You have no right. They're better off with me." "We'll see what the media thinks about that," he threatened before hanging up. Desperate, Evelyn called Jake. To her surprise, he answered. "Jake, I need your help," she admitted, her voice cracking. There was a pause. "What's going on, Mom?" Evelyn told him everything. Marcus's threats, the kid's uncle, her fear of losing everything. "Why do you care so much about these kids?" Jake asked, his voice softening. I can't explain," Evelyn replied, "but they need me. And taking care of them made me realize how much I failed you." Jake was silent for a moment. "Okay, Mom, I'll help. What do you need?" Evelyn felt a wave of relief. Can you watch Tommy and Sarah for a few hours? I need to handle some things. Jake agreed, and Evelyn felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe all wasn't lost. She spent the next few hours investigating the kid's uncle. Her intuition told her something was wrong, and she was right. With the help of a private investigator, Evelyn discovered the uncle had a criminal record. Fraud, extortion, even accusations of child abuse. Armed with this information, Evelyn felt more confident, but her relief was short-lived. When she returned home, she found Jake in a panic. "Mom, the kid's uncle was here. He almost took Tommy and Sarah." Evelyn felt her blood run cold. "What? How?" Jake explained that the man had shown up, demanding to see the kids. In the chaos, he almost managed to take them, but Jake stopped him at the last moment. "I'm sorry, Mom," Jake said, guilt-ridden. "I should have been more careful." Evelyn hugged her son, tears in her eyes. "No, Jake, you were amazing. Thank you for protecting them." At that moment, watching Jake comfort Tommy and Sarah, Evelyn realized she couldn't handle everything alone anymore. She needed help. "Jake," she said, her voice trembling, "I don't know what to do. I'm scared of losing everything. The company, the kids, you." Jake looked at his mother, seeing her vulnerability for the first time. "We'll figure it out together, Mom. I promise." Evelyn felt a surge of emotion. It was the first time in years that she and Jake truly connected. As the children slept, Evelyn and Jake spent the night planning. It was Jake who came up with the idea. "What if you told your story, the whole thing?" Evelyn frowned. "What do you mean?" "Host an event, a charity dinner. Tell the world about Tommy and Sarah, how you're trying to help them. If you control the narrative, Marcus and the uncle won't have any power over you." Evelyn considered the idea. It was risky, but it might work. "But what about the accident? The company's liability?" Jake looked her in the eyes. "The truth, Mom. All of it. It's the only way." Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision. She knew Jake was right. It was time to stop hiding, to face the consequences of her actions. "All right," she finally said. "Let's do it." In the days that followed, Evelyn and Jake worked tirelessly to organize the event. They invited the press, important figures from the city, even Marcus Sterling. On the eve of the dinner, Evelyn looked at Tommy and Sarah, sleeping peacefully. She thought about everything that had happened, how her life had changed. "I won't let anyone hurt you," she promised quietly. Jake walked into the room, placing a hand on his mother's shoulder. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Evelyn nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination. "I am. It's time to face the truth, no matter the consequences." As the night fell, Evelyn knew the next day would change everything. She was about to reveal her secrets, her failures, her humanity to the world. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. With Jake by her side and the love of Tommy and Sarah, Evelyn felt stronger than ever. The charity dinner would be her chance for redemption, to do the right thing. And Evelyn was determined not to waste it. The Aura restaurant gleamed with lights and elegant decorations. Important guests, journalists, and curious onlookers filled the place, all eagerly awaiting Evelyn Blackwood's speech. Backstage, Evelyn adjusted her dress, her hands trembling slightly. Jake approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Everything's ready, Mom. You've got this." Evelyn nodded, grateful for her son's presence. Tommy and Sarah were safely at home with a trusted babysitter. As Evelyn stepped onto the stage, silence fell over the room. She scanned the crowd, spotting Marcus Sterling, who smiled sarcastically, and for a moment, her courage almost faltered. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice trembling slightly. Suddenly, a commotion at the restaurant's entrance interrupted her speech. Tommy and Sarah's uncle burst into the room shouting. Liar! Kidnapper! Security tried to restrain him, but he continued. She stole my nephews. She's a criminal. Panic washed over Evelyn. She saw Jake quickly moving toward the man, while the guests murmured in confusion. At that moment, Marcus Sterling stood up, a malicious smile on his lips. Perhaps I can clarify a few things, he said loudly. Mrs. Blackwood has some interesting secrets to share, doesn't she, Evelyn? Evelyn felt the world spin. Everything was falling apart. She looked at Jake, who nodded encouragingly, even as he dealt with the furious uncle. It was then that Evelyn made her decision. She straightened up, adjusted the microphone, and spoke. Yes, Marcus, I have secrets, and it's time to reveal them. The room fell into absolute silence. Evelyn took a deep breath and began. A few months ago, I caught a boy stealing food from my restaurant. That encounter changed my life. She shared the story of Tommy and Sarah, how she discovered their situation and decided to help them. She spoke about the dilemma of keeping them hidden, about the fear of losing them. But there's more, she continued, her voice growing firmer. The accident that killed these children's parents was caused by a car manufactured by my company. A shocked murmur rippled through the audience. Marcus smiled triumphantly, while the children's uncle stood in stunned silence. There was a flaw in the brake system. A flaw we knew about but didn't disclose in time. I carry that guilt every day. Evelyn looked directly at Jake, who watched her with a mixture of pride and concern. Taking care of Tommy and Sarah became my way of seeking redemption, but in the process, I neglected my own son. Jake, forgive me for all the years I failed you. Tears streamed down Evelyn's face now, but she pressed on. I know my actions have consequences. I'm ready to face them. But I ask you all, don't punish Tommy and Sarah for my mistakes. They are innocent in all of this. She turned to the children's uncle. I know about your criminal record. You are not fit to care for them. I will do whatever it takes to keep them safe. The man recoiled, caught off guard by the revelation. Finally, Evelyn faced Marcus. You wanted to expose me, Marcus? Well, here it is, the whole truth. Do with it what you will. The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn stood there, vulnerable, awaiting the public's judgment. Then slowly, someone began to clap. It was Jake. Soon, others joined him. The applause grew, filling the room. Evelyn saw emotional faces, some crying. She watched as Marcus Sterling quietly left, defeated. The children's uncle had also disappeared. As the applause died down, a journalist stood up. Mrs. Blackwood, what do you plan to do now? Evelyn looked at Jake, who smiled encouragingly. She took a deep breath and replied, I'm going to do what I should have done from the start. I will take responsibility for the accident. I will compensate all the affected families, and I will fight for legal custody of Tommy and Sarah. She paused, then continued with renewed determination. More than that, I will transform my company. We will focus not just on profits, but on making a difference in people's lives. This charity dinner? It's just the beginning. Questions came flooding in after that. Evelyn answered them all with honesty, holding nothing back. When she finally left the stage, Jake hugged her tightly. I'm proud of you, Mom, he whispered. Evelyn felt an enormous weight lift from her shoulders. She knew the road ahead would be tough, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hope. As the guests animatedly discussed what they had just heard, Evelyn and Jake quietly left the restaurant. They had 2 children waiting at home, eager to hear how everything had gone. In the car, on the way home, Evelyn looked at Jake. Thank you for standing by my side. Jake smiled. Always, Mom, always. Evelyn knew this night was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, consequences to face. But with her family by her side, she was ready for anything. The truth had been revealed, and with it, a new chapter in their lives was about to begin. The days following the charity dinner were a roller coaster for Evelyn. Newspaper headlines ranged from "Brave businesswoman faces the truth" to "Corporate scandal exposed." Social media exploded with divided opinions. Evelyn faced a series of tense meetings with her company's board. Many questioned her ability to lead after her confession. "You risked everything," one of the directors shouted. "The stock prices are plummeting." Evelyn remained calm. "I did what was right. Now let's fix this." At home, the situation was no less complicated. Jake, although supportive of Evelyn at the dinner, was still struggling with his feelings. "I understand why you did what you did," he said one night. "But it still hurts to think about all the years we lost." Evelyn felt the weight of his words. "I know, Jake, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Tommy and Sarah, on the other hand, were closer to Evelyn than ever. They had watched the speech on TV and were moved by her courage. "Do you really want to be our mom?" Sarah asked, her eyes shining with hope. Evelyn hugged the children. "More than anything in the world." The legal battle for custody of Tommy and Sarah began immediately. The children's uncle, exposed by his criminal record, quickly lost any chance of gaining custody. "He's left town," Evelyn's lawyer reported. "I don't think we'll have any more trouble with him." Evelyn felt a mix of relief and apprehension. One battle was won, but the war was far from over. At work, Evelyn started implementing drastic changes. She launched a compensation program for all the families affected by the car defects. She also established new safety and transparency protocols. "We're going to rebuild the public's trust," she declared in a meeting. "One step at a time." One day, to Evelyn's surprise, Marcus Sterling appeared in her office. "I came to say I'm impressed," he admitted, looking uncomfortable. "Your honesty, well, it's not something you see every day in the corporate world." Evelyn eyed him cautiously. "What do you want, Marcus?" He hesitated. "To offer a truce, and maybe a partnership? Your new approach is interesting." Evelyn considered the offer. It was an unexpected opportunity, but she needed to be careful. "I'll think about it," she replied diplomatically. As the weeks went by, Evelyn noticed a gradual change in Jake. He started spending more time at home, interacting with Tommy and Sarah, helping with their homework. One night, while Evelyn worked late in her home office, Jake quietly walked in. "Mom," he began, his voice soft. I want you to know that I'm trying, to understand, to forgive." Evelyn felt tears well up. "Jake, No, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "Seeing you with Tommy and Sarah, how much you've changed, it made me realize how much you really care, and I want to be part of that. This family." Evelyn stood and embraced her son, the years of distance finally crumbling between them. "Thank you, Jake," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me another chance." That night, lying in bed, Evelyn reflected on everything that had happened. The fear of an uncertain future was still there, but now it was accompanied by a sense of relief and hope. She picked up a notebook and began jotting down ideas for her company's future. Social responsibility programs, partnerships with NGOs, new transparency policies. The possibilities seemed endless. "Mom," a sleepy voice called from the door. It was Sarah, clutching her teddy bear. "What is it, sweetheart?" Evelyn asked, putting the notebook aside. "Just wanted to say goodnight," Sarah smiled, running in for a hug. As she hugged Sarah, Evelyn saw Jake standing in the doorway, a small smile on his face. Tommy soon joined them, and suddenly, Evelyn's room was filled with laughter and hugs. In that moment, Evelyn knew that no matter what the future held, she had everything that truly mattered right there. With her heart full, Evelyn began to plan not only the future of her company, but the future of her newly formed family. The battles weren't over, but now she had an army by her side. And for the first time in years, Evelyn Blackwood fell asleep with a smile on her face, eager for what tomorrow would bring. 6 months had passed since the night of the charity dinner. Evelyn Blackwood was in her office, reviewing the latest reports. But these weren't typical profit and loss reports. They were documents detailing the social impact of her company's new programs. "Ms. Blackwood," her assistant called. "The community project team is here for the meeting." Evelyn smiled. "Send them in, please." The meeting room soon filled with eager faces. To many people's surprise, Jake was leading the team. "Mom," Jake began, "we've got great news about the professional training program." Evelyn listened carefully as Jake and his team presented the results. Dozens of young people from underprivileged communities had been trained and employed in the past few months. "This is excellent, everyone," Evelyn praised. "Let's expand the program to 3 more cities next quarter." After the meeting, Evelyn and Jake walked to the elevator together. "You're doing an amazing job, Jake," Evelyn said, proud. Jake smiled. "I learned from the best." On the ground floor, they encountered a familiar sight, the Aura restaurant. But it wasn't just a luxury restaurant anymore. Half of the space had been turned into a community center, offering free meals and classes for those in need. "I still can't believe the transformation of this place," Jake remarked. Evelyn nodded. From a symbol of exclusivity to a space of inclusion, who would have thought? As they left the building, Evelyn received a call from her lawyer. "Ms. Blackwood, I have great news. The adoption has been approved. Tommy and Sarah are officially your children." Evelyn felt tears of joy well up. "Thank you," she managed to say. "Thank you for everything." Jake, noticing his mother's emotion, asked what had happened. "The adoption," Evelyn explained. "It was approved." Jake hugged his mother tightly. "Congratulations, Mom. They couldn't have a better mom." That evening, Evelyn came home eager to share the news with Tommy and Sarah, but the house was unusually quiet. "Jake, Tommy, Sarah," she called. Suddenly, the lights came on. Surprise! The room was decorated with balloons and banners. Tommy, Sarah, Jake, and even some of the Aura staff were there, smiling. "But what is this?" Evelyn asked, confused. Sarah ran to hug her. "It's a party for you, Mommy." Evelyn's heart melted as she heard Sarah call her Mommy for the first time. Jake approached. "We knew about the adoption. The lawyer told us yesterday. But this isn't just about the adoption," Tommy continued. "It's to thank you for everything you've done for us, for everyone." One by one, guests stood up to share how Evelyn had changed their lives. Former Aura employees who now worked at the community center, young people from the training program, even Marcus Sterling appeared to praise the changes in the company. Finally, Jake took the microphone. "Mom, I know we've had our ups and downs, but seeing how you've changed, how you've transformed not only our family but an entire community, well, it inspired me to become a better person too." Evelyn was speechless, tears streaming freely. Tommy and Sarah joined Jake. "We love you, Mom," they said in unison. Evelyn hugged all three, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. Later, when the party was over and the kids had gone to bed, Evelyn and Jake sat on the porch, gazing at the stars. "You know," Jake began, "a year ago, I wouldn't even recognize this version of you." Evelyn smiled. "Sometimes I barely recognize myself, but for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm on the right path." Jake took his mother's hand. "You've inspired so many people, Mom, including me." Evelyn looked at her son, feeling a wave of pride and love. "Thank you, Jake, for not giving up on me." The next morning, Evelyn woke up early, as usual. But this time, instead of rushing to the office, she went to the kitchen to make breakfast for her family. As Jake, Tommy, and Sarah came down the stairs, drawn by the smell of pancakes, Evelyn smiled. This was her new normal, a united family, a renewed purpose, a life filled with meaning. She knew there would still be challenges ahead. Running a company, raising 3 kids, continuing to make a difference in the community, none of it would be easy. But looking at the smiling faces around the breakfast table, Evelyn knew she had everything she needed right there. "So what's the plan for today?" Jake asked, biting into a pancake. Evelyn smiled. Today we're going to keep making a difference, one day at a time." And with that, the Blackwood family began another day, not just as a family, but as a symbol of hope and transformation for an entire community. The sun rose, marking the start of a new day. For Evelyn, Jake, Tommy, and Sarah, it was more than that. It was the dawn of a new era, full of promises, challenges, and above all, love. Dear friends, if this story touched your heart, don't hesitate to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion is valuable and helps us bring more inspiring stories like this one. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, join our family and never miss any of our moving narratives. Remember, just like Evelyn discovered, it's never too late to change, forgive, and start anew. Sometimes the greatest act of love is giving a second chance to yourself